2 years ago, I was hunting down at Robber's Cave. When I got out there and got set down in the woods, I hear this loud, growlish grunt sound, just roar. And so I'm thinking, okay, this is probably sounded more like a wild hog, possibly. And so I'm hunting with a high-powered rifle. I'm thinking, okay, if it comes out, I'm going to shoot the hog. Well, I could hear it walking down through the brush. And then I start hearing, that sounded like somebody whistling. And then another one across the ridge did it. And directly I started hearing that whistling back and forth. This thing comes up the hill, comes up the ridge. I hear a growl again, just kind of a hurr. And I sit there for a minute. Well, I get up. When I do, I hear just right there. So I whistle back at it. When I do it, two other ones answer me in two different locations. And they follow me out of the woods. One on each side of me, stayed about 40 or 50 yards behind me. And I kept shining my flashlight back there. And I never could see it.
My name's Matt, and this is Bigfoot Crossroads. This is part 2 of my conversation with Chris, continuing over from episode 83, so if you haven't checked it out, go do so now. We'll continue right where we left off with the conversation. Having an encounter with one of these things, I mean, it's an extremely rare occurrence. But then you do run across people like yourself who have had more than one experience with them. What do you think that is a result of? Is it just spending enough time in areas where they live at? Some people have speculated that after you see one, you kind of get marked or something, and you just end up seeing more if you are out in the woods, out in that environment. What do you think it is?
I don't think it's anything like that. I think other people are seeing them and hearing them, but they're just marking it off to be something else. They're not paying good enough attention. Like, last 2 years ago, I was hunting down at Robber's Cave, and I had my girlfriend with me, and she was hunting in a different area. And when I got out there and got set down in the woods, I hear this loud, growlish grunt sound, just roar. And I thought, okay, down there around Robber's Cave, there are some bears down there, and there's a lot of wild hogs. And so I'm thinking, okay, this is probably sounded more like a wild hog, possibly. And so I'm hunting with a high-powered rifle. I'm thinking, okay, if it comes out, I'm going to shoot the hog. And it was off to my left. Well, I could hear it walking down through the brush. Well, anybody else heard that, they thought, okay, well, that's a bear or a hog. All right. Well, a few seconds later, it goes down off the hill, and I can still hear it walking. And then I start hearing, and I thought, what was that? That sounded like somebody whistling. And then another one across the ridge did it. Okay, there's some other hunters down here. That's what they're doing to, keep in communication, and they're, so they know where each other's at. Well, it went off the hill, and directly I started hearing that whistling back and forth. And just one on each side of the hill, back and forth. And it turned and come up this draw. And I finally figured out, okay, well, that must be somebody doing a deer drive. They're trying to push deer to somebody. Well, this is rifle season. Everybody's wearing blaze orange. This thing comes up the hill, comes up the ridge, and when it gets just straight south of me, or straight east of me, which is the direction the wind was blowing, I hear a growl again, just kind of a hurr. And I sat there for a minute, and it's getting dark enough now that I decided I'm going to go ahead and head out of the woods again. I'm not going to stay till it gets pitch black. As soon as it gets dark enough that I can't see real good, I'll get up and leave. So I thought, okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and ease out of there. Well, I get up, and when I do, I hear just right there. So I whistle back at it. When I do it, two other ones answer me in two different locations. And I'm thinking, okay, well, this has got to be people down there. So I started walking kind of that direction to see if I could, shine my flashlight to see if I could get their attention so they didn't shoot me or something,
Yeah.
And so I'm kind of flashing my flashlight down there. Well, nobody ever flashed any flashlights. And directly I hear a loud limb break, just pow, just crack, And I thought, well, now that's kind of weird. So I turned around and started back up the hill toward where I had dropped Amy off, was going to meet her. And I started hearing back here, and they followed me out of the woods. One on each side of me, stayed about 40 or 50 yards behind me, and I kept shining my flashlight back there, and I never could see it. I mean, I don't know what it was. Was that people? I mean, if so, how are they walking through the woods in the dark? Because by the time I got out, I needed a flashlight. It was dark enough that I had my flashlight out. I never seen any flashlights, and I could just hear crunching, just sloth crunching, but they kept whistling back and forth, just same whistle, just back and forth from each other. And they followed me about 200 yards till I got completely out of the woods and got up on the road and met Amy, and that was when they stopped. I mean, I don't know what that was. I mean, that was just a weird occurrence. I thought, well, okay, maybe there's another truck. Somebody came in after we did, and they're parked up the road up there because there's only one way into this place. And when we got up there was no other vehicles. There was no other vehicles. Nobody was working there.
I mean, you were hunting at the time, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, you were carrying a firearm with you.
Yes.
So, I mean, just instinctively, people out in the woods encountering another person are going to let that person know they're there unless they're up to no good, and
exactly.
Then they're not going to be whistling at one another. But if I'm out in the woods, if I'm out in the woods and I see somebody I don't know out in the woods, and then on top of that they have a firearm, I'm definitely letting them know, hey, I'm over here. How you doing?
Exactly.
Don't shoot me.
Yeah, that's what I was doing. I stood up and walked that direction, shining my flashlight, so they knew for sure where I was at.
Yeah, I mean that's what people do.
Exactly. When I got up there with Amy, she said, "Who was that whistling at you?" I said, "I don't know. I never seen them." She said, "They never shined a flashlight or anything?" I said, "No." And they followed me completely out of the woods. And that was her first thought. She said, "That was Bigfoot." I said, "I don't know what it was," but she's got a fear of them, kind of like I do. I think maybe worse. But yeah, that was pretty weird.
I mean, looking back, especially at the location where you saw that one with the spotlight, we're speculating, but I mean, it hit the trailer with the tree limbs. Do you remember anything else out of the ordinary? Did you notice anything at the property? Did you ever hear any more slapping on the outside of the trailer or anything?
I never did there. Not right there. Now, like I said, that was about 100 yards, 150 yards from where I grew up. My mom's house, I was born, I was a year old when we moved into that house. And, of course, she just passed away about a month and a half ago, but my brothers still live in the same house. And when I was a kid, there was things happened around there. My dad always just wrote it off as something weird, but we would find tree limbs in the yard or found dead deer laying in the yard. He said, "Well, my coon dog drug it up." Well, a 60-pound coon dog don't drag up a 80-pound, 100-pound deer.
One heck of a dog.
Yeah, and then he got into raising quail and pheasants, and he had these big pens out there. And that was kind of an odd story, but I ended up getting the job he started selling them to restaurants, and I got the job of butchering all of them. But so, again, there was all these carcasses, skins, where I'd butcher all these pheasants and quail and sell them to restaurants. And he would take the carcasses down in the woods and dump them off. So, I mean, who knows what was there? I mean, it could have been anything. And back behind us, there was about a 40-acre swamp that went down into Little Salsa Creek. And my brothers did see 2 bears there when we first moved there. They saw 2 little cub bears. So, I mean, there could have been anything down there.
Yeah. But I mean, also, if your brother saw, 2 cubs, I mean, a breeding population of bears in the area, I mean, that would be evidence of it being able to support something like a Bigfoot being in the area.
Well, yeah, that's true. That's true. And thing it was then, I mean, now there's quite a few houses around that area, but back then there was our house and my grandpa's house, and that was it. There was no other houses. I ran all that country when I was young, and hunting and fishing and horseback riding or whatever we did. We went all over all of it. You know, we had motorcycles over it. There was no houses. There was nobody back there for miles and miles. So, yeah, I mean, there could have been anything.
Did you ever run across anybody else growing up that, you know, saw something or heard about something?
Yeah, from time to time we did. One of the guys that hunted with us back years ago swears up and down that he got chased out of the woods by an African lion.
Wow.
And he still says that. He still says that to this day. He still says it to this day. Last time I talked to him, I asked him about it, and that was about 3-4 years ago. And he still swears up and down. He said, there ain't nothing else it could have been. He said, this thing weighed 500 or 600 pounds. And he said, it chased me out of the woods. I had to shoot at it twice. And he said it would stop. And he said, of course, he was black powder hunting. So, you know, it ain't like he can load real fast.
Yeah.
He said he loaded that gun on the run. And he said it would stop and back off a ways, and then directly here it would come again. He said, I shot at it again. He said it never did get real close to me. He stayed about 70, 80 yards from me. He said, this thing weighed 400 or 500 pounds.
And he got a good look at it, like it was a big cat?
He did. He said he watched it come across the ridge, and when he said the tan color coming across the ridge and big, he thought it was a deer. He said when it come out in the open, he said, I realized real quick it wasn't a bear. He said, he said, I thought it was a mountain lion. Back then, well, there wasn't any mountain lions around this part of the country. And so he said, he sat there and watched it, and it was getting late in the day, and he thought, well, ain't no deer going to come through here now after that lion coming through here. And so he stood up and started back. He said, that's when I realized it was still there. He said, I thought it had walked off. He said he got up and started back to the truck. He was hunting about a half a mile from the truck. And he said, I didn't go very far, and I turned and looked, and here this thing goes coming down the ridge towards him. And by the time he got to the truck, he said when he got to the truck, he could still see it out in the edge of the woods. We had parked out in a field. We had 3 different vehicles with us. A bunch of us hunting up there at the time. And he went and got in the truck that he rode in, which was the one closest to the trees. He said he watched it walk back and forth out in the tree line for a little while until one of the other hunters come up there. He said it finally walked off and left. But he never would go back with us. He totally quit hunting. He got into bass fishing and totally quit hunting.
I don't blame him. I think I'd be more worried about that than Bigfoot out there.
You and me both.
I mean, but I guess it's not really that far-fetched. You know, there's a place, growing up, we had a lake house up on Hudson, and there was a town not too far from there called Adair. And there was just this little side of the road zoo out there that these people kind of ran out of their house. And we stopped in there one time, and I mean, they had all kinds of animals. They had a couple lions there. And if somebody had, you know, a lion or something and it got out, I don't think they would tell anybody out there.
No, probably not. I mean, that's the only thing we can figure.
So I guess it's possible that maybe it was a lion. Who knows?
Yeah, that was north of Salsa by Nycut area, but yeah, between Salsa and Tahlequah. But yeah, that was interesting. Then at the same property where I said the one that hit my trailer house, before that trailer was there, my grandpa had a house down by the highway, but when they rebuilt the highway, they tore his house down, so he built that trailer house up there. Well, my nephew was about 8 or 9 years old, and he used to ride his little motorcycle down to my uncle's house. And we just got through building my uncle's house back down in the woods behind that trailer. And he would ride his motorcycle up there at night and go down there and play with their boys. And so anyway, he'd come around by where that trailer house, like I said, where he said it later, and hit the road going down to my uncle's house. And he said just as he turned that corner, his headlights hit something in the road. He said it was black, and he said about 7 foot long. He said it come out of the trees and landed in the road and stopped and looked at him. He said, I crashed my motorcycle and trying to stop. And he said the thing made one jump and landed on top of a 6-foot chain link fence and then went off of it and was outside. He said it was a black cat that was probably 7 foot from nose to tail. And it scared him so bad he wouldn't even go back down there after dark no more.
Wow.
And that was right there on the same property, which I don't doubt that, because during that time, I found a set of big cat tracks in the dust, in the dirt that went down along that road down into the woods. And I kept telling my family and everybody, it's got to be a mountain lion, because the tracks are too big to be a bobcat. And then not long after that, he seen that one, and he wouldn't go down there no more.
I had a buddy growing up from high school. He passed away whenever we were in our early 20s, but he was one of my best friends, and he was half Native American, and his family had some Native American land out in the country that belonged to his grandma, where they would go out and hunt and stuff. And he told me several stories about a big black cat that was out on that property that he had seen, his older brother had seen, his dad had seen, and his dad and his older brother had both shot at it. And, I mean, I don't know, maybe they just missed or whatever. It didn't get hit. It didn't act like it got hit or anything. It just took off running whenever, they shot at it. But, he said this thing was just massive like that, like what you're saying.
Yeah. I mean, I've had, a lot of people I've known over the years have said they've seen them, but I never have seen a big cat like that. But I did see a mountain lion up in the edge of Missouri, but never around here. But like I said, I've always heard stories of people with the big cats and that kind of stuff.
Well, have you ever experienced anything that you would consider like paranormal?
Well, yes. The first one I ever seen, first paranormal thing, I seen my great grandma, and I didn't know it was her at the time. She had been dead since before I was born. But it was kind of a odd deal. Like I told you, my grandpa had a place up on the highway, and around the road, it was almost a half a mile around the road my grandpa had built through the woods to come from my house, my mom's house, to my grandpa's house. So I'd been up there with my grandpa, and I hung around my grandpa majority of my childhood. He was way more of a father to me than my dad ever was. So I spent every waking minute I could up there with him. He taught me so much over the years. But I was up there, and my mom had called up there and said it was time for dinner. So I was headed home. I was just kind of walking along around that road, headed toward my mom's house. Well, when you leave my grandpa's house, you'd walk down his pond dam, and right at the end of his pond dam, the road turned and went to the right down to my house. Well, it was an open field out here in front of there, and where he grew wheat and corn and different things like that. And then off to the left on the back side of the pond, down there about 80, 90 yards from that corner, was 3 big hickory trees. And so anyway, I walked down the pond dam and I got to that corner, and I turned around and looked, and there's this old woman standing down there underneath them 3 hickory trees. And she's just kind of standing there looking around. And she looks up at me and raises her hand up and waves at me. Well, I wave at her, and I turn around and go. And like I said, I'm 7, 8 years old, something like that, roughly, 10 maybe. And I turn and start down to my house, and I go over a little hill, and I think, why in the world would that old woman be standing out there in them trees? I better go back and see if she needs some help. So I turned around and went back, and when I got up to the top of the hill where I could see those trees, she was gone. And I thought, well, that was really weird. So I turned around going home, and I guess I was quiet or something at dinner, wasn't saying nothing, probably bothering me thinking about it or something. So my mom asked me, she said, Chris, is something wrong? And I said, well, I just seen this old woman. And she said, well, what do you mean? I said, well, I told her the story. And I said, she was wearing this real flowery dress, and I described the dress and the bonnet she had in her hair and all this kind of stuff, said what she looked like. And my mom just got a real funny look on her face. And she just didn't say a word. She just got up and headed to the back of the house. Well, directly she come back with a picture of my great-grandma and handed it to me. I said, that's it. That's the dress she's wearing and everything. She said, that's the dress she was buried in. And that was several years before I was even born. That was, again, on the same property where whatever it was through the stick at the trailer house.
I got willy bumps.
That one still gets me every time I think about it.
Yeah.
But when she showed me that picture, I said, that's her. I said, who is this? That's her. That's the dress she was wearing, the bonnet and hair, everything. That's her. And she said, that's your great grandma. Said she died 2 or 3 years before I was born.
Wow.
I've got 2 or 3 stories about paranormal stuff. I got several of them, actually.
If you want to share them, I'm all ears, man.
Well, I don't mind. A couple of them are kind of funny. One of them is right after I got married the first time. I was 21, I think, 21 or 22. And we moved to Miami, Oklahoma. I got a job with a friend of mine that was a taxidermist up there. And he said, man, if you come up and work for me for a while, I'll teach you all I know. And then you can open your own shop again later or something. So we moved up there and I went to work for him. We rented a little cabin, little house that was like 2 houses, 3 houses down from his. And it was just a little concrete brick, tiny little house, probably 400 square foot all total. But it was just her, just me and my wife at the time. And so anyway, it was behind another house. Well, we lived there for probably, I don't know, 3 or 4 days, maybe a week. And we had a big waterbed. Was laying in there in that waterbed. My wife was asleep. And I was almost asleep. And directly the lights in the kitchen come on. And I thought, well, that's weird. So I reached over and I could feel her still in the bed asleep. I thought, well, that's weird. We must have left the light on. So I got up and I walked in there to turn the light off. And when I did, the refrigerator door standing wide open and one of the cabinet doors open. There's a jar of peanut butter sitting on the counter with the lid off of it. And I looked at that and I thought, well, she must have been sleepwalking because she had a tendency to sleepwalk every once in a while. She must have been sleepwalking, got hungry or something. Or I fell asleep and didn't realize it or something, so I had to be her. So I put everything away, shut the doors, and there's a gallon of milk sitting out on the counter too. And so I put everything away, shut the doors, turned the light off, went back to bed. 3 or 4 nights later, I get woke up, something wakes me up, and I look and the kitchen light's on again. Well, this time I reach over to her and I kind of shove her and I said, "Go, you left the lights in the kitchen on." She said, "I ain't been up." She said, "I've been sound asleep." I said, well, okay. So I get up and I go in there and same thing. The kitchen light is on, refrigerator door standing open, the milk sitting out on the counter, the cabinet door's open, the peanut butter sitting on the counter. So I go all through the house thinking somebody's in there. I go all through the house looking, there's nobody in there. And okay, so I shut it all back off again. And so put it all away. We'll go back to bed. Well, that goes on. That happens 3 or 4 more times. And finally, I'm thinking, okay, there's an old man or somebody living here that like peanut butter. So it's his ghost is doing it. So I thought, okay. So I lay in there, and the next time it happens, it wakes up, and I get up and I walk in the kitchen, and again, everything's still sitting out like it was. And so I said, when you get done, turn the lights and everything off. I'm going back to bed. So I went back to bed and just left it. Got up the next morning, all of it was put away. And the lights were turned off. And I thought, now that's just too weird. But it did that 2 or 3 more times. And I got to where I would ignore it. And directly it would shut it all back away and put it all back away again. Well, I kind of had forgotten about it because it got to where it didn't happen very often. And like I said, by this point, I'm used to it, not bother me. Well, so my nephew decides he wants to come up. When he was younger, he would come every year and spend 2 weeks with me during the summer. We'd fish and different things. Well, he come up there, was going to stay with me there. And so I had a little bitty bedroom off kind of back in the back. It was a little tiny 2-bedroom house. But so we fixed that little bedroom up for him. And he come up there, and I forgot to mention, I didn't mention anything like that to him. And so anyway, we went to bed that night and was going to go fishing the next morning. It's weekend. We was going to go fishing. So I got up and was going to go wake him up to go fishing, and he's laying on the couch asleep. And I thought, well, that's kind of weird. So I woke him up. I said, couldn't sleep in the bed? It wasn't comfortable. He said, no. Said somebody come in there and lay down in the bed with me.
Nope.
And he's like 7 or 8 years old. I said, what? He said, somebody laid in the bed with me. He said, I couldn't see him, but I crawled over him and I got out of the bed and I came to the couch.
Wow.
So anyway, after that, I went and asked the lady that owned the house. She had a big house in front of it. And I said, y'all ever had anything weird happen here? She said, what do you mean? So I told her the stories, what's been going on. She said, oh my God. She said, somebody else that we rented it to just left one night in the middle of the night, just got up and left. So that probably explains why. I said, yeah, it probably does. We stayed there another 2 or 3 months before we ended up buying a house and moving. But the look on my nephew's face was priceless that morning, though, I promise you.
Yeah. I mean, I guess maybe you ought to leave some bread out for him or something. Maybe a butter knife or something.
A butter knife or something, just make it easy for him.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was kind of weird. But I've had all kinds of stuff happen. The house where we live now, we have stuff happen there all the time. It all went to last night. Something slapped the side of our house last night, scared my girlfriend. She jumped up and couldn't sleep the rest of the night. So, and it's a brick house. I don't know what hit it. I didn't hear it. She was telling me about it this morning about 3 o'clock when she woke me up.
I mean, is it in an area where it could be a Bigfoot?
Yes. In fact, I've talked to several of the neighbors around me here, and several of them have said they've seen it. So I don't doubt it. We woke up one night, my dogs was barking, and Amy wouldn't let them out the door. And when she stuck her head out the door, she seen a foot go behind the door. She said thought it was a bear foot, an actual bear's foot.
Mm-hmm.
And so we don't know if that was a bear. We did find tracks that winter from a little black bear, but she seen what looked like a black foot went behind the house, and the dogs run around there, chased it, and then directly here they come back. The weirdest thing that's happened here at this house, though, we've had several weird things happen, but I've never seen anything that I would say was a Bigfoot or anything like that. But one night, she's kind of an insomniac. She has insomnia. She don't sleep very good a lot of nights, so I go to bed way before her. So I went to bed about 10 o'clock, 10:30 one night, and this was 3 years ago, I think. It was fall. It's cool outside, and I had the windows open. I'm just laying there enjoying the breeze coming in the windows, just about to fall asleep, and I start hearing a little kid laughing. Just, ha, 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 ha. And ends up being 2 of them. It sounds like 2 little kids laughing and playing and running around in the woods up behind the house, just back and forth, and just giggling and laughing. I'm thinking, well, what in the world is my neighbor's kids? I mean, my closest neighbor's a quarter mile away, and I'm up on the side of the mountain out in the timber, and that's it. I mean, there's nothing else around me. What in the world is his kids doing up here by my house this late at night playing? And then it dawned on me, his kids are a little bitty. His oldest kid's like 6 years old, and the little one's a newborn baby. They wouldn't have been up there. And so I got up and looked out the window, and I couldn't see any flashlights or nothing like that, but I could hear these little kids running up through the woods, and then they'd run the other way. It almost sounded like 2 kids playing chase up there in the middle of the woods at night. And so I'm laying there listening to that. By this point, I'm really interested. I got a window right at the head of our bed. And so I've almost got my head laying in that windowsill listening to all this. And I hear this just right behind my house. I'm talking 20, 25 yards, and it's pitch black back there. There's no lights or anything back there on that side of the house. And I hear that, and when I did, the kids stopped laughing, and you hear them walking, just single file line, over to that loud noise, that grunt. And I thought, well, now that was weird. So I sat there for just a little bit longer, and then I hear the little kids almost like talking, just and directly I hear a real low, deep voice coming from about 40 or 50 yards to the south of where the first one was. I hear it just go, now, what is that? And so I'm sitting there at the window, and dummy me never think to get a recorder or anything. We've got one laying there in the window for that, but we never thought to use it. So I'm really get to listening then, and then the other one over here where the little kids were says something back to it, and they go back and forth, and it sounds like talking, like some kind of foreign language, real low, really deep voices, raspy, deep voices talking back and forth. The one on the right was with the little kids was a little higher pitched than the other one, but not much. I mean, they were both really low pitched, way lower than I can make my voice, but just blah, 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 blah. And the other one, the dance trick. They did that back and forth for probably 5 or 6 minutes. And then I hear the kids start laughing and giggling, and then turn and they go up the hill. Well, and then I hear whatever those other 2, I hear crunch, crunch, crunch as they walk up the hill. And I thought, well, that's crazy. So I lay there for probably another 45 minutes or an hour before I finally fell asleep and never heard anything else. Well, I get up the next morning and Amy's standing in the kitchen. I walk in and I said, "Did you hear them weird noises last night?" She said, "Yeah." She said, "I would have sworn I heard some little kids laughing and playing after I came to bed." So evidently they came back after she came to bed and I was asleep, and went through the whole thing again. She said she could hear them out there laughing and playing and running around out in the woods, and she could hear the adults talking back and forth. And I said, "Really?" I said, "I was listening to it before you came to bed." She said, "Well, they were still doing it." I said, "It got loud enough that I got scared and shut the windows." So that was pretty weird. And then about 2 weeks after that, we've got a big den room. We were sitting there, me and Amy was sitting in there watching TV or something, and something about 11 o'clock at night was watching a movie or something, and something hit our kitchen window so hard that I thought it was somebody breaking in. I mean, wham, real loud. I jumped up and run in there, and I couldn't see nothing. The window wasn't nothing broke, but it sounded like it should have broke something. And so I jump up and I grab a rifle, and out the door, I go out the back door with the light, trying to see if there's somebody out there screaming. Never seen nothing. Oh, well, that was weird. So 2 or 3 days later, then goes on, and I decide I want to walk out to my garage. It's about probably 10 o'clock, 9:30. I was fixing to go to bed. There was something out in my garage. I've got a detached garage up on the hill. And right on the back side of that detached garage, I had some rabbit cages. I raised meat rabbits. And I had some rabbit cages set up there. And so I'm going out in the garage to get something. And I walk out my back door, and my light's out on the back door. I kind of like it that way, so I haven't fixed it. And I walk out, and it's dark. As soon as I walk out the door, off to the right, just right above our bedroom, I hear just a real low growl, just kind of just like that. And I kind of stop and look over that way, and it don't do anything else. And I think, okay, so I just walk on out and go to my garage and get whatever it is. And when I come back in, that time I get almost to my door, and something right behind my rabbit cage goes, "Roof." And I stopped and I looked up there toward it, just kind of standing there. I didn't have a flashlight or anything, but I can see my rabbit cages. I just can't see what's behind them. And I stand there and look at it, and directly it goes just a real low, like that, like, God, tired of this, you know? And then I hear something grab a tree, and you can hear the bark on the tree as it pulls itself up. And then I hear 2 steps, just crunch, 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 as it walks up the hill, goes off behind the house. And so, anyway, went on there for 3 years. It happens twice a year. It's like something migrates into there twice a year, usually in the spring and in the fall. And that was what's funny about last night. I was thinking about that a few days ago. Me and Amy was talking about it. I said, it's about time for him to come back. And then last night we had something hit the house. But then, anyway, after that last deal, I was sitting out in the front yard, had a little fire going, and Amy had just stood up and walked in the house and went in to get a drink or something. And my dogs are laying there at my feet. Directly, my dogs jump up and take off running. And when I do, I hear something coming through the trees on the other side of my house, up kind of back behind my garage. And it sounds like a boulder coming through the tops of the trees. Crash, 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 crash. Bam! Hits the ground and bounces and rolls a couple times. And I jump up and take off running over there. I've got a flashlight in my hand. I'm shining that flashlight. It wasn't a real strong one, but shining it out there trying to see what it was. And all of a sudden, it sounds like a herd of elephants comes off the top of the mountain. And he's breaking trees, snap, crack, pop, running, chasing, coming right down the hill like where that rock went. And I could see, the light was just bright enough I could see trees moving as it went through, come down off the mountain, crashing through that mountain, down, and then went down all the way down, like toward the road. And I heard it sounded like it crossed the road and went into the pond on the other side of the road. I heard a big splash. And just about the time all that happened, Amy comes walking back out, and she said, "What are you doing?" I told her what was happening, but it's just been weird things like that ever since we've been living here. We've been living about 6 years, and it's just been one thing after another.
Wow. Do you have rabbits in the rabbit cages?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's another thing. There for a long time, I had about 10 or 12 rabbits, and they were my breeders. I had about 8 breeders, and then I had a couple cages for the young ones I was raising up. And like I said, I raised them for meat, but I would go out there in the morning, and all of my rabbit cages would be open. All of them. None of the rabbits gone. that every cage would be opened up.
Huh.
And so my boys was with me on the weekends. My boys were with me. And sometimes they would feed them for me or something. I'd go out, or they'd go out and play with the rabbits. I'd ask them, I said, y'all got to be careful, not leave them rabbit doors open. They said, we ain't been to the rabbits. And I got to noticing, and it was happening about once or twice a week for about 2 months' time. I'd go out there, and majority of my rabbit cage doors, if not all of them, would be standing wide open. So something, and I've got the little slide locks on them.
Yeah.
But something had to know how to work the slide locks. And so some of them are 2 or 3 decks high, 2 or 3 cages on top of each other. You know, it wasn't like they were all down at ground level or something. And every one of them would be open, but I never lost a rabbit.
Huh.
Sometimes they would be out running around on the ground. I'd have to catch them. But unfortunately, my rabbits are mostly pretty gentle. But I don't remember ever losing a rabbit.
You mentioned you have a tape recorder sitting in your windowsill. I guess they're not tape recorders anymore, but
yeah, just a little digital recorder.
But that's for trying to capture audio of the stuff that's going on.
Yes, Amy did that about 2 years ago. We was having some many weird noises and stuff going on, but she put it right there so that, you know, if that happened again, she could do it. But neither one of us ever think about it. We've had several different things. And of course, usually it's just one or two noises. It's not a whole, like that one night, you know. But yeah, we've haven't been able to catch anything on recorder. So,
how far away is the tree line behind your house to your bedroom window there?
10 feet. I mean, it's literally, we're built on the side of the mountain. Our whole yard is about maybe 1,000 square feet. And that's mostly in the front of the house. The back of the house there's trees literally 10 feet from the back of our house. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
We're on the side of the mountain. We've got 6 feet behind our house. We've got a retaining wall that's about 3 foot tall. And then the timber starts right on top of that retaining wall, about 2 foot off on top of it, and goes from there up. And it's just rocks and bluffs and everything from there. And there's nobody lives up there. There's no houses up there. It's just thousands of acres of mountains and rough terrain, oak trees and that kind of stuff. So,
if I can make a suggestion, take that recorder and go set it on top of that retaining wall and just turn it on and leave it out there whenever you go to bed.
Just leave it out there?
Just leave it out there.
I may do it I may try that this fall. She's been talking about maybe trying to get one of them parabolic microphones or something like that, just to.
Don't mess with the parabolics. Speaking from experience,
yeah.
I mean, they're fun, but if you're wanting to actually record audio, they do distort the audio quite a bit.
Oh, really?
And the thing that I didn't like about them, using them out in the field, is they do such a fantastic job of collecting and concentrating the sound. You can't really judge distance, you know, and you have to point it right at the direction of wherever the sound's coming. And to me, I just didn't like it. And like I said, the audio recordings would be kind of distorted compared to what they actually sounded like in person.
Right.
But we did have some luck with just leaving recorders out.
Okay.
Kind of at the edge of the territory, or sometimes just even going out and finding a fork of a tree you can reach up and stick it in, just leaving it out there.
Be kind of interesting to try. Amy's about got to the point where she's so scared of them now. She used to think she kind of wanted to see one, but after all the noises and everything we've had going on around her house, she's about got to the point where she don't want to see them. She don't want to even know that they're there. And that's the reason she kind of freaks out when something happens like last night when they slapped the house.
Yeah, it's one thing to be out somewhere camping or something and see one, but to have them in your own backyard like that, it's a different ball game.
Right. She decided when we first moved here, she wanted to put some, you hear people gifting them and all this kind of stuff. And I said, I don't think that's a good idea. She said, well, I want to try it. I want to see if anything happens. So she goes up in the woods behind the house, and it started with me walking up there one day. We've got a trail that we walked up on. We've got a little feeder that's set up for the deer, and we'd walk up that trail and put the feed out about 100 yards from the house, I guess. And I walk up there to put feed out for the deer one time, and again, that's another mistake we figured out now. But to put some corn out for the deer, and when I go up there, right on the edge of this trail that we walk on, there is an old shoe that we've never seen before, and we've walked this trail 100 times. If it would have been there, we'd have seen it. An old shoe laying there and a blue cigarette lighter laying on top of it. This is an old leather shoe. It was still in good shape, but you could tell it had been out in the weather for a year.
Yeah.
And a blue cigarette lighter laying on top of it. And I thought, well, now that's weird. So I just left it there, and I went on up and put the feet out, and when I came back, I kind of picked it up and looked at it thinking, why in the world would this be here all of a sudden? I started to carry it off the hill, and I thought, no, I'm just going to leave it here and see if anything happens to it or whatever. So I moved it about 3 foot and laid it beside the base of a big tree. Well, I go on to the house, just left it there. About 3 days later, that's when about every 3 days, I'd go up and put the feet out. 3 days later, I go up there to put the feet out, and that shoe and that lighter had been moved about 40 yards closer to my house and was laying right in the middle of the trail. The shoe laying on the ground with the lighter laying on top of it. And I thought, what in the world? So I went and asked my boys. I said, did one of y'all do this? And no, we ain't seen it. So I asked Amy. She said, no, I ain't been up there. You're the one's been feeding the deer. So, okay. And so I actually carried it in and showed it to her. I said, this was laying right in the trail, and showed her where it was at. And so that got her, she said, well, I want to see if I take something else up there, if they will switch it out or something. So she takes a bunch of blue, them little glass marbles like you put in aquariums.
Yeah.
She takes a handful of those, a blue balloon, and some little, I think it was like a little Bigfoot doll, like 3 or 4 inch tall Bigfoot doll that she had picked up at a garage sale or something somewhere. She takes them up there and she puts them. I told her what tree that they were, the shoe and the stuff was at. So she takes them up there and puts them there. Well, we can see the balloon from our house. Well, we watched it for 2 or 3 days and the balloon never moved or anything. So it finally just goes flat and goes dead. And I thought, well, I'm going to go up and feed the deer. So I'll grab some corn and head up that direction. And when I get up there, all the blue marbles and the little Bigfoot doll was gone. And so I came back after I fed the deer. I came back and I told her, I said, well, your marbles and stuff's gone. And she says, really? She said, I got to go up there and see if they left me anything else. So we go up there and we kind of just make a little circle, walk around through the woods. Well, about 70 yards up in the woods from there's a big tree that was blown down. And there was 2 of the little glass marbles laying on top of that tree, on the stump of the tree. And that's all we ever found of them. And I said, I don't think that's a good idea. I said, I don't think we need to bring them closer to us. They're here anyway. We don't need to get them habituated to anything. So she hadn't put anything else out.
I mean, she already lost some of her marbles, you know.
I think she lost a bunch of them. But
that's interesting. Did she choose blue because of the blue lighter?
Well, yes, that, and because I can't think of who it is. Folks down in Southern Oklahoma that put up YouTube channels, she had watched them, and they said something about them really liking the color blue. And so that's the reason she chose the blue marbles.
The reason I asked, there's some of us old timers that have been doing this for a while, and some of us kind of think that they might be able to see better in the UV spectrum than we can.
Oh, okay.
And so blue would really stand out to them, as opposed to red, which, you know, is the popular theory that they can see in the infrared spectrum. I am not part of that camp personally. I believe that if anything, they can see better in the UV spectrum. So blue would be an attractant. Yeah.
That would make sense. And that would make sense too on the trail cameras and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I know that's infrared, but it's still the blue.
Yeah.
Interesting. I never thought of that.
Going back to that one you saw when you were hunting, I mean, you got a good look at that one. And I know you were young and it was kind of shocking and your head's trying to process what you were seeing and everything. But whenever it turned around and faced you like that, just gut feeling, did you think you were looking at an animal or a person?
a person. I was looking at a person. I mean, at that point, I still was thinking that it was one of our buddies that's just trying to scare me. But the build, the stature, the stance, the way it walked, the way it moved was human. It was not animal. It was not a bear. Bears don't. I've seen since then. I've seen bears stand there. I got chased by a bear in Colorado. That was not a bear. Bears don't move like that. What else could be anywhere near that size? It was human. It's not orangutan. It's not ape. I don't think it's gorilla. I think it's human.
Have you ever thought about putting your taxidermy skills to the test and making a Bigfoot?
I've thought about that. I've thought about it a couple different times. Over the years, I've made all kinds of stuff, just goofing off, But it's like, no, I don't really want to. It's just not something that I've drawn pictures for people a time or two of what I've seen, but I'm not a very good artist. But just showing the stature and the build and all that kind of stuff. And then the taxidermist that made one a few years ago, I can't think of his name right offhand. I've met him a few times at taxidermy competitions and stuff. And Amy was she did taxidermy too. That's actually how we met. And she was actually seeing that mount when he brought it. And, but yeah, and she has pictures of it and stuff. I said, well, that's real close to what I've seen. The one I seen, I think, was a little more muscular. You hear people talk about it being 4.5 foot wide. This one wasn't 4.5 foot wide, but it was probably a good 3 foot wide. But it was built like a 19-year or 20-year-old college football player. A linebacker, just ripped. I mean, just solid muscle from neck down. And like I said, I've seen it through the background. I couldn't see like abs or nothing, but I could see the figure and the shape. No, it was not an animal. There's just no way it was an animal. It was a human of some type.
You've had quite the life and quite the experiences, sir. Do you feel that you're lucky or unlucky looking back on it?
I don't really know. Sometimes I think I'm lucky and sometimes I think I'm unlucky because it seems like every time I turn around, something weird is happening. We just purchased a piece of property down by Robert's Cave and we walking around on the property. There's a little pond over on the edge of it and we found 3 footprints right there. It's like, really? We can't get away from it. So I don't know. Fortunately, I haven't had anything happen that like made me feel, other than the one that made me feel threatened. Nothing else has ever threatened me or made me feel in danger, except for that one. But I threw a rock first, and I don't have a doubt in my mind if it wanted me, it could have had me. When I hit the fence and bounced off the fence and turned around and look, it's still just standing there. I know dang good well it could have covered that 80 yards faster than I could have got up and got gone, So I don't feel like it's tried. None of them have threatened me or anything, but it's the fact that it just keeps happening, that I keep finding things and seeing things and hearing things. But I think a lot of times it's just strictly because I'm observant now, probably more so than most people because of all the things I've had. And having a taxidermy experience and going to school for wildlife biology, wildlife management, I know the sounds animals make. I know what's not fox, what is a fox, what's a bobcat, what's not. And when we hear things like here at our house, we hear a big roar come off the mountain. That's not a coyote, and we don't have wolves. What else could it be? And then whistles out in the woods. We hear whistles all the time when we're deer hunting and stuff. My sons have, my boys have. What whistles? It's not a bird chirp or it's a whistle. It's a human type whistle, but really loud and low. And what is it? So I don't know how to answer that. It's lucky or cursed or unlucky or what, but it's entertaining. I'll say that. I got one more story I want to tell you. It's a short one real quick, but I got one more story. And this is a hearsay. It's not one that I seen or happened to me. But when I first moved up here on this mountain, we started having weird noises. I was up at the feed store up the road from the house here, and was talking to a guy. And Amy's got one of the Bigfoot stickers, Oklahoma Bigfoot stickers, on the back of her window. One of the boys that was working there, he was standing out there by our car with her. When I come out the door after I paid, he was standing there and he pointed at it. He said, "I like your sticker." I said, "Yeah, pretty interesting." He said, "I seen one about a month ago." I said, "Really?" And this was about 3 years ago, right before deer season. He said, "Yeah." He said, "We was baiting deer just down here. Couldn't find out he hunts on the same mountain I live on." And he said, "We was out there baiting our deer." And he said, we walked out to the field and there was one standing about 40 yards behind our feeder. He said, it was in kind of thick brush. He said, "I didn't see it till I got all the way to my feeder and I looked up and seen it standing there." And he said it was standing right beside the fence. He said it just put one hand on the fence and stepped over the fence and walked off in the brush. And I said, "Really?" He said, "Yeah." He said, and then I went and told the guy that owns the land, let me hunt on his land. He said, he's an 80-something-year-old man. He said, "Yeah." He said, "They're around here." He said, "We've seen them several times." He said, "Back when I first bought this place," he said, "we roped one."
Do what?
He said, he said they roped one.
Roped one.
Said they were out riding horses, working their cattle. This old man's 80. He said it was when he bought this place when he was in his 20s. He said they were out working cattle. And he said they seen this little one go running across their field. So they chased it down with their horses and roped it, tied it up, took it home, and put it in a corn crib at their barn. He said that thing just sat in there screaming and howling all the time. He said for 3 nights, he said third night something come and busted the wall out of the corn crib and got it out.
Holy smokes.
I keep wanting to go over and talk to him in person, but I haven't had a chance to. That's what I was told.
Well, Chris, man, I've enjoyed it, man. You did not disappoint, sir. You got quite the collection of stories, and I hope you stay in touch. I want to hear what happens in the future, especially at your place.
For sure. I'm hoping we don't get too much more, but like I said, for the last 5 or 6 years we've been living here, that's every spring and every fall. Usually, and it's funny because we'll have deer everywhere up until right about usually first or middle part of October. They all disappear, and that's when we really start hearing all the noises and everything.
Huh.
And so it'd be interesting to see if it happens again this year.
Yeah.
But I've never gone out and looked for them. I've never really wanted to find one. I don't know. It's just one of the things I feel like I'm asking for trouble if I do it. I seem to be very susceptible to weird stuff anyway. I've had all kinds of weird stuff like that. So I don't feel like I need to go out and look for anything. I don't put out cameras or anything, but Amy keeps trying to get me to try to video or try to use the audio thing anyway, but I may have to try it.
And if you've had an encounter with Bigfoot or something else you can't explain, send me an email at bigfootcrossroads@gmail.com. If you get a chance, check out the website, bigfootcrossroads.com. You can find links to social media, a contact form to reach me, past episodes, and links to merchandise. Grab yourself a t-shirt or a hoodie. And until next time, remember, there's something in the woods.